One thing a vignette has is strong description. Strong description really lets the reader bring themselves into the scene, really lets them experience what's going on around them. Description involves capturing people, places, objects, events, and feelings in words so that a reader or a listener can visualize and emotionally and maybe even physically respond to them. Pure description contains little or no reference to action or time. It just is. So usually in any type of story we read or book we read, there's a description built around the plot. Pure description is simply describing a situation or a place or a time or whatever. It's a little easier to describe pictures or things you see when you're talking about visual description. But you also have to think about what goes on when you're in those settings or in those scenarios. So look at the picture on the left of the creek or the water in the setting. Looks like it's maybe Alaska, someplace north with the trees like that. and look at the door on the right. Now think about what sounds go on during these situations. So the sounds that are present on this slide give a lot of difference, make a lot of difference in the mood that the pictures present. You know, one sound with the water sounds pleasant, the other one sounds frightening. One sound of the door sounds pleasant, and the other one sounds like you're in prison. So when I talk about trying to elicit or trying to get an emotional or physical response from the reader, you want to show what's going on and make it a visual movie in your mind, and put that out in words so they can act as though or feel as though they are actually in that location. Telling just describes the situation with vague, non-sensory vocabulary. So an example would be the basketball game was filled with exciting, breathtaking moments. I'm telling you that they were breathtaking, but I want to show how they were breathtaking moments. I want to show the scene. The basketball game was won in the last 2 seconds by Monica Lopez, our typo there, our rangy point guard, who hit a jumper from the top of the key over the outstretched arm of the player, frantically trying to stop her. So we can see the action there. That is what the showing is. We want to try to see it, experience it, feel it, and hear it. What we want to try to do is describe something with emotion. We don't want to just say, there is a 5-foot-long wood desk that reaches 3 feet high. We want to add the emotional, the personal impression about this mahogany old wood desk that was my grandma's and sat in her living room for years and years, and I would see my grandpa sit there and write his bills or whatever. You want to have that emotional, intentional mood that you're trying to portray to that reader. You want to put basically your opinion is there. You know, some people might have thought the basketball game was stressful, but you thought it was exciting. So you want to explain it your way. Whatever it is that you are describing will come out with an impression, a dominant or a main impression that you're trying to make on your audience. So if I describe that basketball game the way I did, my impression that I might want to try to get across to people was that it was exhilarating or exciting. If I described the desk like I had, I might want to portray the dominant impression of nostalgia or a family. So you do that by using imagery. And imagery is when you describe things clearly through your senses. You describe vividly what you see. You use your words to explain the sounds. You use words to say what you're smelling, that old moist paper probably in the desk, the smooth touch perhaps, even taste if we can, not always. Maybe we have tasting salt in our mouth from sweat or what have you, but if we include all those senses, we develop something called imagery, and that imagery puts out an impression or a basic mood with that description. Here are some examples of imagery, some examples of some descriptions that are appealing to the senses, with an enjoyable evening at a college football game. Another way that we can describe and really make the reader feel as though they are experiencing the situation that we're talking about is through figurative language. That is language that is not taken word for word. That is not the "it says." It is not exactly what the words say. For example, it is the meaning behind the message that we're trying to talk about. And a lot of times we're using them and we don't even realize it. One of the types of figurative language that we can include in our description is a simile. A simile is when we compare two things and we just put the word like in there to say if it's like something, or we can put the word as in there to say how it's doing something as something else is doing it. So for an example would be, my bookshelves stand side by side next to the desk like wooden beasts of burden patiently waiting for their loads to be evened out. So I'm comparing the bookshelf to wooden beasts of burden. So that gives me the impression that these shelves are solid and there's a lot of things that they're holding in there. They're tough, they're masculine, they're dominant. A metaphor is another way to describe, it's another way to compare. And with a metaphor, we're just talking about something as if it is something else. So for example, I sit down at my desk, my wasteland of unopened mail, half-finished homework, open books piled atop one another, and scraps of paper covered in ballpoint scribbles. So I'm comparing my desk to that of a wasteland of unopened mail. The desk is not really a wasteland, but I'm just referring to it. I could just say, here I am sitting at my wasteland of unopened mail. So when you just put something as something else, just assume that it's being discussed as something else, we can get that mental picture. So obviously this desk is a mess. Another type of figurative language is a hyperbole. The hyperbole is just an exaggeration. So an example could be, I could barely move the 100 pounds of trash stacked 100 feet high in the corner of my room. Obviously, it's obviously not 100 pounds or 100 feet of trash. But what I am saying is you can visualize the piles and the stacks and you can tell that it's a mess. Another type of figurative language is personification. The personification has the word person in it. It's an easy way to remember it. Personification is when you give people traits to things that are not people. An example would be, my filing cabinet, top drawer half open, waits to be fed. Well, we're not feeding a filing cabinet, but what it's meaning is there's all those papers piled up on the desk and the filing cabinet is just standing there waiting for things to be put in it. Now obviously it can't wait, but meaning that that's what you need to do. It needs to be cleaned up and put away. And I think the easiest, maybe sometimes most overlooked, way to get your strong description is to just be specific. Anytime you can use a proper noun, use a proper noun. Use verbs that you can visually see. Don't say I went somewhere or I did something. You know, use the verbs that you can see. I trudged, I chopped, or whatever it is. Don't use words that are non-specific. Don't tell the emotion like I was sad. Show what happened when you felt sad.